we might not think it's fun or interesting or a good idea to build for disability in space. We might totally not even want to. We might think it's a bad idea. But when we get to space, there will be people with disabilities because space is freaking dangerous. Space is always trying to kill you, and if it can't kill you, it's perfectly satisfied to like maim you or disable you in some other way.
Hey, you guys.
Good morning.
Well, we were chatting just before you joined, and just this last statement around reliving the G. What were you just reliving?
I know, isn't it a crazy thing? So AstroAccess, we do this. We're the whole purpose of the organization is to map out what is required for disabled people to start taking our role with everybody else as potential astronaut candidates. Because as we move forward into the next sort of iteration of human experience, a lot of that is going to be space related. We hopefully that, as long as we don't wipe ourselves out in the next 50 years. So one of the things to test out is what accommodations disabled people might need in microgravity and zero gravity. And so the only way to really get real zero gravity on Earth, I mean, you could fling yourself off buildings, but that's, super not productive. Yeah. So you go on these zero-G parabolic flights where the jet kind of goes up in the air. That's a modified 727 zero-G corporation has this, and it flies up and then it dives down and then it pulls up and it flies, up and down, up and down, up and down in these great big sine wave kind of things. And I've been on 2 now, and they're amazing. And it's the best thing in the world. Yeah. Second only to lunar gravity is microgravity. And so I was listening to the recording of our first one and sort of just kind of reliving it, and it was amazing. And B, just going through like you want to do and take notes and find out what really did happen, because your memory of that is kind of like ketchup. I mean, it's tomatoes to ketchup, right? You go into it with tomatoes thinking you know what's going on, and you end up at the end with like ketchup in your brain. Like, what happened? Yeah. What did we do? How long did it take? How many times did we go up and down? Who crashed into who? Whatever.
Wait, how long were you up there for? And how many people were up there? And what was the criteria? What kind of folks were there with you? Scientists? Who else was there?
Okay, so the criteria was they had to be disabled people. So we had on the first flight, if I can reconstruct this, we had 2 deaf ambassadors, 6 people with mobility disabilities, and 4 blind folk. I was on the blind person team. And we recruited people who had some interest in space and were also sort of scientifically inclined or artistically inclined. And then we just set folks up with different tasks. Like for the deaf crew, it was things like, if you're signing in American Sign Language in microgravity, does your hands moving around, does that knock you from side to side? Because no one knows that, right? So we had to find out. Right. What do you do with your legs if you have paralyzed legs in zero gravity? Is it best to sort of keep them tied together? Do you want them just to fly around? For your own safety, you might want them confined in some way. If you're blind, how the heck do you know where the heck you are? If there's no up or down anymore, it's easy enough for a blind person to find their way around a room, right? But what do you do in a room where all of a sudden there's no gravity? And by the way, in this case, the plane is wicked loud. Think of a regular airplane flight, but then boost that up. It's kind of like sitting next to a lawnmower, kind of loud. Mm-hmm. And so how do you stay oriented and get your business done if it's that loud and you can't see and you're floating and maybe you're upside down?
Wow.
So we had, I think on the first flight, 14 parabolas. We had a Martian gravity parabola. It depends on the angle they dive at, right? If they dive shallow, mm-hmm. the gravity's less. So we had a Martian level, Martian gravity parabola, 2 lunars, and then something like 12 20-second bursts of real live zero gravity.
And what were your observations of it? How did everybody do in that environment?
We were great. We had so much fun and we got so much done. So I think the first necessary comment is that none of the disabled flyers got sick, because mm-hmm. that's always the first thing. They call it the vomit comet for kind of a reason. Actually, Zero G Corporation does not call theirs the vomit comet, because they are very gentle and they really work hard to make nobody actually get sick. But none of the disabled flyers on my flight got sick. I had a blast. I didn't even feel nauseous at all. So things are not as difficult in zero gravity as you think, but they're way weirder than you might imagine. Mm-hmm. Everything is kind of hard to do. If you let go of something, it floats out of your hand, right? Just release your fingers on a thing. I mean, just put down your sandwich and all of a sudden your sandwich is on the other side of the cabin, right? Everything is difficult and weird, but nothing is as completely impossible as you might think. And I don't think that disability is the big variable there. Everybody has to get used to microgravity. Everybody feels weird when they're up there for the first time. And disability adds kind of a flavor to the whole thing, but it's not impossible.
I mean, is disability even a thing? I mean, we call it disability on the ground, but in zero G, is disability the same?
Let's see. I think the answer to your question is that disability is largely cultural in either environment. So the reason it's a disability to ride around in a wheelchair is because people build steps everywhere, right? And if you don't have all those steps, then riding around in a wheelchair might be inconvenient for other reasons, but you can get everywhere you need to go if we build everything properly. So if you think carefully about how you're constructing your environment, you change how disability impacts people, right? So I'm still not going to be able to see whether I'm on the ground or at my house or on the space station. But if I'm on a city street, then blindness is kind of a factor because nothing is really built for that. If in my house, blindness is less of a factor because that's my damn house and I have things labeled, I know where stuff is. If I'm on the International Space Station, the beautiful thing is that's brand new. And so we can choose to build that environment so that disability is not a big deal. If we want to, that's a choice that we have.
You know, meeting an alien civilization, you know, they may have developed with, you know, totally different sensors, you know, or we often talk about senses in a very reductionist manner as if there's only 5 senses, but the reality is that these senses blend into one another. They're pieces of other senses. We don't really know exactly how they work together. And we've seen, you know, an eye has developed independently 5 times on this planet, you know, over periods of time. So we know that there's some receptors to light, you know, that's important, or sound. You know, alien civilization may be raised where they don't have a bright thing, so that sensor is smaller. So how do we even think about how we might interact with an alien civilization? What would be the first steps?
Yeah, totally. So the thing you need is information. You don't need to be able to see. You don't need to be able to hear. I mean, I suppose you don't even need tactile perceptions. Absolutely. You don't need any of that stuff. What you need is information inflow. You need situational awareness so you don't get eaten by a bear. And as time goes on, if you manage to keep not getting eaten by bears, then you start needing other kinds of awareness so that you can build other things. You can communicate with each other. You can get together and make a culture and then, build telescopes and rocket ships and go to space. But what you need is information to be passed back and forth. And you're totally right. We think of the 5 senses and we like make kids memorize them. But a good dose of humanity has synesthesia, right? Where the 5 senses kind of overlap. The most common kind is that thing where people have the perception that letters have colors, right? When I grew up, I thought everybody knew that letters had colors. And then I learned later on that there are some people in the world who don't perceive it that way. And I thought that was really weird, but okay. But yeah, the senses overlap and mix and combine, and you don't necessarily need to use one sense to get your business done. So you can look at something and that's cool. But if you're walking past it and you hear its presence, that's also cool. And depending on how you design your environment, both of those things can work great.
You know, a turtle measures time very differently than you know, we might, right? Because it moves much slower. Is the issue of time with an alien civilization? Would it be, you know, how they receive messages and how they talk? You know, will we be challenged to figure out how to communicate?
I mean, I think our job as people who think that we're going to communicate with aliens is to start questioning every single thing that we think of, right? So yeah, we should question time. Kind of our sense of time has to do with the way our brains are structured, right? There's a delay between anything that comes in and anything that goes out. A real thing happens, and there's always this little bit of delay, which I find sort of creepy, but it's true. Like there's always this little bit of delay between a thing that happens and your perception of the thing. It's a measurable delay. So, I mean, that's a real thing, right? And we deal with it, and we're fine. We're okay. We mostly don't get eaten by bears, and we're okay. But if you construct an intelligent organism differently, that time delay could be more, it could be less. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
There could be a creature where different senses have different kinds of time delays, and they know about that and they work with it. So yeah, anything that we think we know is suspect, I think, for me.
Now, if we were gonna speak with an alien civilization, where would we begin? What would be the first things we would try and figure out?
I mean, that's really honestly one of the hardest questions to answer.
You had quite a response.
Yeah.
Thinking about this a long time.
I've been thinking about this a long time. I've been thinking about this a long time because, okay, look, here we are talking to each other. We share the same language. We share the same interest in the same topic. We've got a lot of the same vocabulary. We've agreed on the rules of conversation. And it's perfectly possible that we will misunderstand one another, right?
Yes.
I mean, think of the number of times with your intimate partners, you totally misunderstand one another. And these are people that share, like, I don't even know, I don't have a percentage of context. We share so much understanding. We know each other so thoroughly, but we can misunderstand each other so badly that we're furious with one another. And then we have to sort that all out.
Yeah.
So the idea that we're just going to plug in the universal translator and start playing chess and talking philosophy is ridiculous. We're just not going to do that unless there's one magic out. And I think I heard Carl Sagan say this first, so it's totally not me. But we are a baby civilization. We are just in diapers, wandering around, looking up at the stars, going, wow, that's kind of where we're at. We just have radio for 100 years. We are babies. So any civilization that we meet is going to be more experienced than we are. They're going to be older. They might have a xenolinguistics, xenoanthropology science in place. So they might look at us and go, okay, I got another one. That'd be a type 3. Yeah, they burn coal. They have global warming. They still fight with each other. They've got 7,000 languages going on. No world government. Okay, that's a type 3. So we should approach them in this way. And that's how we'll understand them. Right? I mean, they might have this all sorted out. And that would be great.
How do we know, though, that they're older than us? How do we even have that assumption that, because any other civilization is older?
That's a really good question. It's because we are so young. If they were younger than us, they wouldn't even be broadcasting. The only way we're going to find anybody is if they're broadcasting, right? I mean, we could, if there are really nice sentient poodles on Alpha Centauri who are doing all kinds of cool things, we're just not going to meet them unless a thing they do is build a radio telescope or a faster than light ship or whatever, which is technology, right? And so if they're out there and we contact them, because we are just at the beginning edge, they're going to be doing more things than we do.
But that's assuming that they're going to go the same path that we are. So to the radio, to the spaceship, but couldn't it be that there would be even have a different way of broadcast?
I suppose if you have aliens that evolved in space that communicate by radio, it's a whole different kind of life than we have. I suppose it's possible.
We're not even, our broadcasting has degrades as it gets further away from the planet. Do you think that we're going to get it that way? Like it would be broadcast towards us and we'd pick up a signal, would that be how we discover life somewhere else?
I mean, well, okay, what we're going to do probably is we're going to look at the atmospheric signatures of the exoplanets, right? And we'll go, ooh, oxygen. Ooh, look at that. That's probably, that planet out there has probably got life. But then I don't know, beyond that, we wouldn't get much until we intercept some kind of radio signal or some kind of laser signal or some kind of other signal. And we're listening kind of a little bit, but we're not listening to everybody all at once. And we periodically sort of cut funding for Project Phoenix and for SETI, and we don't always fund those programs. So it's also possible that we got a really great radio signals were broadcast at Earth 150 years ago, which is nothing in galactic time. And we didn't have radio then, so we missed it.
Yeah. Do you think that it's possible that aliens are actually here already?
That's not something I have any idea about. I mean, here's what I want to say. I don't have credible evidence that is happening. Mm-hmm. Every once in a while, someone will call me and say that they, are in touch with aliens, and I listen, and I
right.
still have credible evidence that that's happening. But I mean, they're dear people, right? And it's difficult because often it's something deeply personal to that individual. And so I don't want to come in there with my atomic skepticism and slap them down because,
Right.
well, I could be wrong. I
Yeah.
don't think so, but I could be wrong.
I want to get back and understand your, interest and kind of your field, your work. And also just to let everybody know, the audience, not everybody knows all the incredible things that you do, because, if you could just give us a little background there. But, did you read science fiction? Like, what was your impetus for all of this and kind of your fascination with the other world, if you are, these other worlds in space?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it's really important to understand that sense of wonder and magic that we all feel when we're little kids. If we can hold on to that, is kind of the universal thing, and we never know quite what path that is going to take. I mean, a lot of astronomers and scientists say that they go out at night and they gaze up at the stars, and that's what caught them. That sense of wonder that comes from the stars caught them. But that sense of wonder does not come from the stars. That sense of wonder comes from inside people. If the stars caused wonder like that, if that's what the causal factor was, we would have a much more peaceful planet than we have now, because everyone would look up at the stars and go, "Oh yeah, about that fight I was going to have, oh, forget it. I'm good now. We'll make peace." So that sense of wonder is not a sensory thing. I remember being outside at night when I was a kid, and just the vastness of everything and the smallness of me, I found magic. I mean, there's that sense of magic that you have when you're a kid, and maybe it's first elves and fairies, and then it steadies down to something you can actually study.
You mentioned something in something that I read that you had written about. You also say that other people may gaze at the stars, but you did not have that experience. You said you felt yourself in space. And so is that all of the other senses that were at work? What are those senses? Is it the elements, the weather? How do you feel the smallness or grandness as you kind of your relationship to the planet?
That's a really good question. And I'm tempted, like my automatic response is to punt it to the other senses and say, "Oh, I felt the wind. Oh, I heard the wind moving across the big wide field. I stood next to a tree and the tree was mighty and tall." But whatever that stimulus is, the wonder comes from inside you. I mean, if you're a meditator, maybe you felt it once or twice, if you're lucky, right? That sense of, wow, wait, I'm alive. And isn't it ridiculous and weird and joyful and terrifying to be a live thinking creature? And that's the source of all of that for everybody. I mean, I think we shunt our explanations of that through our senses because that's what we've got. And that's a little bit less embarrassing to talk about than we feel something spiritual, or we feel something inherent in being alive that's joyful and terrifying. I think it's much safer to say, I heard the music and it was beautiful, than I'm alive and that's really weird and scary and joyful and great.
How do you think that'll be when we go to other planets? We talk about being in, here, it's inside us, but I'm sure the surface of Mars has a totally different texture and feeling to it than being in the woods here, being that there are no woods on Mars.
I don't think it matters. I think that, I mean, you feel the grandeur of things, whether you're looking out at a desert scape or a lunar scape on the moon, or trees. I mean, that's just available to you. There's a poet. It's one of the Scottish poets, and he talks about, I wish to heck I could remember who that was, but he talks about like finding beauty in the city, in all these places where you don't think beauty is, or you don't think wonder is, but all of a sudden, if you stop and you pay attention and you take a breath and you slow yourself down, then it's there. And I think it's there everywhere.
Right. Have people been receptive to your ideas about how to build for disability in space?
That's a good question. This is a new idea. And so people respond to a new idea in various ways, right? Some defensively, some excitedly, some with dismissal. But I think what is going to happen, here's the thing. We might not think it's fun or interesting or a good idea to build for disability in space. We might totally not even want to. We might think it's a bad idea. But when we get to space, there will be people with disabilities because space is freaking dangerous. Space is always trying to kill you. And if it can't kill you, it's perfectly satisfied to like maim you or disable you in some other way, right? Once you get to space, there's going to be disabled people there because that's what space does to people. It's not a nice place. We're not evolved to live there. We're not safe there. So whether we want to or not is kind of not really the question. The reality is that human beings are frail, vulnerable little oxygen breathing sacks of water that need a lot of care and a lot of safety that they're just not going to get in. I think as people understand that it's doable, they understand that we should do it. And, you know, we are right now at the inflection point where we haven't built that many space habitats yet, right? So we're in a really good position. I feel really happy to be having this conversation now, as opposed to 100 years from now when we've already built a bunch of habitats and people are going, oh no, what have we done? We've screwed up so bad. All the people who go to space who become disabled, what the heck are we going to do with them? We have not built this environment to have any accommodations at all. What are we going to do with these people? Are we going to chuck them out the airlock? I hope not. We can't really send them back home because, you know, we're halfway to Mars. What are we going to do?
Well, you know, we're all losing our senses anyway. We're losing our minds first and foremost. But a question for you. So with like, do you talk to NASA, for example? Are we bringing people in, you know, considering people for astronauts? I mean, where is this conversation happening? Because as you said, it is probably really critical to understand how lots of different people are going to respond to these different environments. But where's that conversation?
I mean, I think for where we are, we're doing great. AstroAccess has had representatives from the major space industries on our flights. We've had representatives for NASA. My position at the Library of Congress right now is funded by NASA. Thank you, NASA. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We love you. Thank you. But I mean, I think that we're doing okay for where we are. We need to keep pushing, though, and keep reminding people of what's possible, what they can do, how it's good for commerce. I mean, if we're going to have space tourism, we don't want to exclude 1 out of 5 people on Earth who has some disability, right? 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5. That's a lot of folks. So we want to make sure that everybody, I mean, from if I put on my capitalist hat, which I don't often wear, it's a very uncomfortable fit for me. But if I put on my capitalist hat, I will say that if you have a business and you're selling a thing, you don't want to sell the thing to only 80% of your possible customers. You want to sell it to everybody. And we all know that as we grow older, we acquire disabilities. And also in at least developed countries, as you grow older, there are a certain segment of the population that has more money because they've accumulated wealth. And we want everyone to go up, right? We want everyone to be able to afford their weekend in orbit in 75 years.
I mean, I think it's a fundamental question, not even about disability. It's more a question of how do we live in space? You know, it's like right now we sort of float around in these tin cans, which aren't very appealing. You know, it's like I wouldn't, you know, it's like I'm not sure I really want to go to the space station because it's like it seems like it'd be kind of a crappy hotel, you know, at the moment, you know. So it's like, how are we going to live there and what are the accommodations going to be like? You know, I mean, does that ever come up in your conversations?
Oh yeah. Well, first off, it might be kind of a crappy hotel, but it's got a hell of a view, right? And you can float around, which is endless fun. But for my money, where you want to live, though, is on the moon because lunar gravity is more fun than zero gravity. I can't even talk about lunar gravity without laughing. It is so much fun. You are every ballerina. You are every ninja warrior. You are every acrobat.
That sounds great.
I forget what the percentage is. It's like 1/7 of the Earth's atmosphere or something.
Yeah, it's 1/6 of the gravity. And so,
But
like, if you leave up in
describe
the
it.
air,
Yeah, tell us what it feels like.
oh my God, people sell everything you own for lunar gravity.
Tell us why you were about to say you leap and then what happens?
You leap up into there. So here we are. Okay, so my experience of lunar gravity was, I think I've had like 4 20-second bursts of it in my life, which is 4 20-second bursts more than almost everybody, right? So I was we're in the 727 and it goes over the top of the parabola and you feel for a moment like maybe you're going down in the elevator, but then that sort of unpleasant sensation stops. And there you are, you're just standing on the ground and someone says, well, it's lunar gravity. And you're thinking, whoa, what? And then you move and you might take a little hop And I was holding on to a rope that was about little, like 6 foot high over my head a little bit. And I jumped up in the air with my left hand holding onto this rope. And there I was up in the air. And I could tell that I was falling down, but I was falling so slowly, so slowly. I had time to like whirl around in the air, kick my legs out, kick my legs back, think about the fact that I was falling. And then I sort of landed instead of with a boom, the way you usually land. It was just like a, oh, wow. Now I'm on the ground. And so then I sat down on the ground and I lay down on my stomach and I thought, oh, they kept yelling, do a push-up. And I thought, well, do I do push-ups? I guess I can do 1 or 2. So I tried to do a big rigorous push-up. And not only was I able to do a push-up, but without bending my body, I pushed with my hands and I just levered into a standing position. Can you imagine? You're doing a push-up and you give yourself a push, and without bending your knees, without contacting the ground, suddenly you push yourself to a standing position. And then I almost fell over backwards, which was funny. But the freedom and the strength that you felt is amazing. I think that, it's a little bit dangerous because you will, like if you run into something, you still have the same mass, right? So a collision is still bad and you don't really want to fall that far. But in the confines of where we were, which was a vessel with padding on the floor, it was the most fun you have ever had, and not as disorientingly weird as zero gravity. And zero gravity is also insanely fun and amazing, but that's sort of profoundly disorienting in a way that is surreal and kind of makes you wonder what your body parts are for. Like, what are these legs for? They're floating in weird ways and I don't understand what they do anymore. Zero gravity is kind of is more of an acid trip than lunar gravity is, I guess. Not that I have had any acid trips, but I think that's what it is.
Thank you for those descriptions.
How do you see the future of space? Do you see it that we're all going to be going up on trips and doing these different things in 75 years and 100 years?
I don't know. We have choices if we survive, right? I think if you've asked me 20 years ago, I would have said, yes, it's going to be great. And now I think about what we're doing to our planet, what we're doing to our environment, the harm that we're doing. I am not at all sure that we'll make it, which is sad in 1,000. Well, how many people are 7 billion, 8 billion? It's sad in 8 billion ways if we can't manage to get our damn act together and live responsibly and lovingly. We will not only not have a space program, but we're out of here. But that said, if we can work together peaceably and intelligently, and then yes, I think that we will continue to have incredible benefits from the space program, which brings you GPS, not just Velcro, but also GPS and weather prediction and all kinds of other good things that will happen, including therapeutic ways to spend maybe your old age. Got this bad knee. It's not such a bad knee if I'm on the moon, is it? No. But we could have that. We could have all the good things if we don't wreck it.
That you're bringing up such an important point, because the idea of what we learn and, what NASA learns, what we're learning in space, obviously bring those principles here first, right? So just any more insight around that, and particularly when we circle back to the topic of disability, however we want to, whatever the right word that is, what else can we be learning that we can bring, that we can apply to a more peaceful, as you say, a better life, a kinder place here where we are right now, because we are all still on this planet. Any lessons?
It's a really good question. Sometimes I feel like I'm using the disability lever to make space better, to make the future better. And sometimes I feel like I'm using the space lever to make disability on Earth better. And on a good day, I get to do both of those things. But the opportunity of moving into a new kind of living, which we would be doing in space, everything is going to be new, right? We have choices about that. And we can choose to continue our same old bad habits, or we can choose to stop, rethink, be better to each other, be better to our environment, and live a glorious, joyful, I don't know, maybe we won't get all the way to glorious and joyful, but we can make things better. So right now, largely because we defined some people as disabled and constructed our world to disadvantage that sector of people, because we've chosen to do this, we are basically working at 80% capacity, because we're excluding 20% of people who could be And I mean, some disabled people obviously are artists and scientists, but we do that sort of despite the built environment, not as welcome participants. Oh, so, we have so many choices, and we can build these inclusive spaces that don't disadvantage anyone if those are the choices that we make. And we can do that. We know how. We just have to decide to do it.
Thank you so much, Sheri. This was an incredible conversation and sharing your insights. And everybody who's watching, listening to this, please go explore the work that Dr. Sheri Wells-Jensen does. And we'd love to have you back another time. Good luck with everything that you're doing.
That would be awesome. Yeah, anytime. I love all the things I'm doing. And I'm really grateful to people like you who dig for the good stuff and who are making the future happen. Like your work in bringing people together, having these conversations is part of the solution to the problems that we're having now. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.